Hey everybody, this is Drew Daniel for MELS605. I'm here working at school on a snow day and had time to work on assignment number 1, which was to read chapters 1 through 3 of the Basic Guide to Supervision and Instructional Leadership. This book is by Carl Glickman, Stephen Gordon, and Jovita Ross Gordon. And the assignment was essentially to read the first 3 chapters, and based off of that and your personal experiences, think about some things that stood out to you based off of supervision and moral purpose, factors that describe the schools of the present and visions of effective schools, and sort of hone in on one of those categories. I decided that something that I would like to do is really speak to the visions of effective schools, because I think as an upcoming administrator or someone who aspires to be a principal, that's got to be at the top of your list on how to make your school the highest functioning educational facility that it could be. I'm going to go into a screen share here. If I can figure that out. Okay, there's my screen share, and here I am right here. So I created a Google Slides presentation that I can follow through and sort of talk at the same time. This is for, like I said, MELS605 with Dr. Stedman, and I'm going to focus on the visions of effective schools. When I read chapters 1 through 3, I had some major takeaways. What deems a school effective? Is it behavior? Is it academic scores? A variety of extracurricular activities, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, and kids getting their hands on things and creating things, the type of courses offered? Is it student engagement, or is it inclusion and a sense of community among the student body? And when you read all those things, obviously, you want all those things together, but I guess the biggest thing is, how do you get that? So, specifically chapter 3 of this book, really speaks to research based off of what the best schools do, based all the way back in the 1970s. And I guess the point of this presentation is going to show how it's related to me and the work that I've done, and also how this research has, one, stayed the same, and also been modified. I've really become passionate since I began this program about how to achieve desired results in one school. And so the question is, how do you achieve, desired results? So the reason why this portion of the reading interested me is because over the summer of 2016, I was granted 3 weeks of summer internship time. It was paid, which was wonderful. But one of the things that I did that was a really big piece was creating the CNA that I've linked here. If you would like to look at it, Dr. Stedman, actually, I don't know if you have viewing rights to it, so I'm going to show it now. But I completed this with 2 other individuals. It's the comprehensive needs assessment. And this is a huge document that shows strengths, grows and glows, if you will, of your school, areas of concern, what can you do to improve them based off of student achievement, and several different analyses of data, the instructional programs that your school offers, teacher retention rate, discipline data. It has demographics of staff and students, the perception of your school, the vision, and then you get into talking about priority concerns for your specific school, technology that we have at our school, like what the needs are. And so that was a huge undertaking to complete that assignment. The results were really astounding. As a regular teacher, you have, as a teacher who's not involved in something like that, is what I mean to say, you don't understand how much analysis of data that leaders of the school do to try to promote a vision to improve. So the results, after looking at, there was a recurring theme. There's a huge achievement gap, just like in several different schools around North Carolina, between students of color to white students. So we had almost 40% difference in scores based on our EOG data and EVOS data, as well as students with disability compared to students without disability was almost 50%. So the question becomes, does this matter? Well, of course it matters. Why haven't we fixed it? Well, I think we're trying, but what policies and procedures need to happen to improve our school and to really focus on this piece? So I put this picture of how does a school improve that achievement gap, and you have the lower socioeconomic status over here, and minorities and students of color, and then you have rich and privileged students over on this side. And I thought it was a good picture to show based off of the focus of that comprehensive needs assessment I did. So that's why this portion of the chapter was powerful to me. So now we're going to talk about, based off of chapter 3 specifically, early case studies on effective school research. Starting in the 1970s, they came up with 5, and I'm summarizing this, based off of what I read. But there was 5 major takeaways I thought from the 1970s analysis. Schools that were effective based off of their case studies had very clear expectations, had order but not rigidity, clear communication to students of learning the basics, proper resources based off of needs, and a way to assess both teachers and students effectively. But one thing that I thought was interesting, a major takeaway, was many of these things still ring true, but there's a lack of intuitive data that was linked to the individual school's needs and growth in those 1970s case studies. Compared to now, there's so much more data to look at. A second wave of effective school research came, and there was a couple mainstays. One was clear goals and expectation stays, order and discipline, and strong leadership, of course. But now we're talking about, here's some differences. Now they're talking about turnover rate and how it's important to not have a big turnover rate in your school. And the question that I thought, just a side note, I'm interested for current research, is it really that bad to have a big teacher turnover rate? I guess it would be, but I sometimes wonder if having new faces and, new teachers in a school and new personalities, if it mixes it up and leads to innovative teaching. 2 was staff development. Now we're putting the importance on training your teachers to have collaborative skills, and best practices need to be shared. Maximizing learning time, anything from in between classes, bell times, and shortening that up, and looking at lunch and everything like that. Electives, do you offer 2, do you offer 1? Maximizing learning time of rich instruction, and like I said before, collaboration among teachers with the importance of PLTs. Now this is starting to pop up. The trend, and one of the reasons that I focus on chapter 3, came when I read page 32, in which it describes how, even though this research really focused on effective schools and what the major 5 components of them are, and then the second wave of research, you had a couple other 3 or 4 more added in of characteristics. The traditional effective schools often still ignored or failed to raise the achievement gap based off of low income, minority, special needs groups of students. And this research hit home with me based off the work I did in the summer with that comprehensive needs assessment, and what we found with that huge achievement gap we had, which is actually, I forgot to mention, way higher at my school than it is other surrounding affinity schools in my area compared to the district. So it's clearly a problem that needs to be addressed. And then I found this graphic which states that poor and minority students get more inexperienced teachers with 3 or less years of experience than do students who are not of color and who are not of students with not students with disabilities. So page 32 of the textbook from this book here references characteristics of schools who made it a priority to focus on the achievement of these sets of students that I'm talking about. So highlights of those, I think this is a really important piece here. These 4 pieces here indicate what it takes, because they did separate studies to see, all right, so these schools are effective, but what about the schools who are really effective with those kids that are in the minorities? And so things that stood out here were those schools had cultural awareness, specifically professional development aimed at addressing cultural differences and special needs, a culture of caring just in general in the school, making that a priority in their vision. And one piece, number 4, basic skills are taught in conjunction with rich, well-designed, innovative lessons. So they're making things where kids have to create and where they're collaborating and asking deep questions, but they're also making sure before they get into that, they're teaching basic skills. So you don't lose somebody right off the get-go. And I found this video which I thought really hits home on this. I'm going to start it here.
When we give kids work that is rigorous, challenging, but still possible, when their work they do feels meaningful, when we give kids messages about belonging and trust, that they are actual members of the academic community that they're going to school in, it has a huge effect on kids' motivation. And so a lot of the schools that I visited in my reporting for this book that I think are doing the best job of helping kids with their motivation look a lot different than other schools. The kids are much more engaged in the classroom. The work they're doing is sometimes more rigorous. They're doing long-term projects. They're working together in groups. They're assessing themselves.
It's actually a really good video, and clearly that guy's promoting a book that he wrote regarding effective schools, but I really, when I scanned through it at that 26-second mark up to about where I stopped it, I thought that really hit home with number 4 here. So how do we create a marriage between these characteristics, these 4 things I just talked about, and the other effective schools research? Well, that's the whole point of this thing. So there were some critics for this school effective research, the 2 waves of it, the first and the second wave, the one starting in the 70s and then the next one. And according to the text, there's a quote, "School effectiveness has not found a satisfactory way of dealing with the fact that schools and school education are essentially about growth, progress, and change." And I highlighted growth and change because I think now, currently, this is what leaders are looking at, individual schools, individual students, and everybody's not going to be lumped into the same, and you're looking at growth. How did you get from here to there? Not everybody together at the same finish line, you know what I mean? So my belief is that this is why there's this huge push for this portfolio style student achievement. I went to go to a PD session, and it was a 3-day convergent session, and the keynote speaker, he came in from Canada, his name was George Kuros, really innovative leader. He said that by 2025, he thinks every kid should have a about.me page when they graduate, which has like all their digital portfolio stuff, everything linked, that a college could just look at right away, or a prospective employer could look at and see everything on one page that's linked. So I wanted to make this larger. This is like one of those digital portfolios that has a student who's in high school. It has his work all the way from when he was in elementary school to high school. It has his creation, his work on different core instruction pieces, his writing. So that's kind of, I think, the direction everything's going in now. A major takeaway from the effective schools research piece is that, according to the text, schools should focus on student outcomes and assess progress towards rigorously reaching those outcomes. What does this mean to me? Well, creating career and college-ready students with the skills necessary to succeed in the 21st century. So our job as educators is to make students be ready for their life by the time they graduate, whether they go to college or whether they go jump into a career or they go to a technical college for a 2-year degree. They need to be ready for that. So this applies to me based off of this Vision 2020, the county I work in. They've really changed things. By 2020, WCPSS, Wake County Public School System, will annually graduate at least 95% of its students ready for productive citizenship as well as higher education or a career. And we have objectives and all these things that teachers can look at to help them do that in the classroom. Okay. So now the last piece of the chapter 1 through 3 from the book, The Basic Guide to Supervision and Instructional Leadership, moves away from just effective schools research and starts talking about school improvement research. At my school, we have a school improvement team. It's kind of what this is all about. And here's what the research says about how to focus on school improvement rather than just effective schools. Sorry, I'm skipping all around here. Here's where I want to be. So the major characteristics, there's 6 that I kind of analyzed and shortened up from the text for school improvement findings. What makes a current school successful right now? 1, distributed leadership. So you got the leaders up top, and then they're finding teacher leaders and distributing their leadership. Democratic style leadership where everyone, your department heads are filtering down in-house PD and things like this. Number 2, recognizing the individualities of each school. Each school is different. You look at the student perception, you look at the student body and the teacher demographics, and you look at where these schools are. You can't compare all schools the same way. That's why it's going to this thing about growth. And number 3, parent involvement. I've been really involved based off of the artifacts, which have been really useful for Gardner Webb. In the summer, I was able to create a Twitter page and a new website for my school, and all these things have really harnessed a lot of energy at our school and got teachers doing innovative things and posting what they're doing and sharing best practices. So sharing things with parents and the community and getting it out there is a big thing for school improvement. I read an article, this YMCA piece, so I put that in there. I read an article actually yesterday in the paper about how in the county that I live in, they're building a new school that's like in connection with a YMCA and some housing developments that are all right there intertwined. So when you go to school there, you're going to be with the people that you're growing up with, and the teachers are going to have a part in the community, and then they're going to create jobs with the YMCA. So this is a huge piece of success. Specifically for closing that achievement gap, I would say. So making in-house and external PD a priority is number 4. Trainings are really important for teachers to stay on top of things. Number 5, focus on collaboration and shared best practices. Isolation is not the key anymore. You can't shut the door and do what you've been doing for the last 10 years. You need to work with your PLT and figure out what's working and analyze data. And number 6, multiple levels and indicators of success. Don't put all your eggs in the EOG basket. You need to have several measurable data pieces, whether they be school-centered, and you create them, a survey, check marks along the way for both teachers and for students that measure growth. And finally, to sum it up, overall highs from the reading, I wanted to read a quote from page 35, which says, "For successful schools, education is a collective rather than an individual enterprise." What does this mean to me? This means that teachers should be treated as professionals and work together towards one common goal, which is helping kids. If you're not in it for helping kids, then teachers shouldn't be teachers, And number 2, including all facets of community, kind of what I talked about on the last slide. Parents, kids, teachers, and admin create a special sense of importance in educators and drives all parties to become agents of change to ensure that kids and students will be ready for their next phase of their life by the time they graduate from high school. So that was my presentation on chapters 1 through 3 from this book, and assignment number 1. This is an individual assignment, so I wasn't to Zoom with anyone else. Thank you very much, and take care.